Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Auto-transposable music system through all 12 collections of 7 notes. Each collection of notes automatically transposable to all 7 modal perspectives, changing the tonic as we do the rotation, part number 3. So get ready and some coffee because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin', and you need Microsoft Excel for that. You're in Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay because we basically built this from a blank worksheet but started in a prior presentation. So if you want to build this entire worksheet from a blank sheet, you may want to begin back there or just build the part of the table that we're currently working on. If you do have access to this workbook, though, 4 tabs down below, including a very colorful fretboard tab we may refer to, the example tab, in essence the answer key, the practice tab, it's got pre-formatted cells. So you could practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay because we'll be working in the blank tab where we started from scratch in a blank worksheet. Going to continue in essence in the blank part of the worksheet, practicing not only our musical skills, but our Excel formatting skills as well for formatting's sake. Let's go on over to the example tab. Quick reminder of our overall objective, wanting a system allowing us to put down our musical information, in essence our songs, as efficiently as possible, also allowing us to easily transpose that information to all 12 collections of 7 notes, as well as rotate that information through each of the modal perspectives, changing the tonic as we go through that rotation. Also having a system which I believe will be the baseline for future DAW systems and MIDI systems, which really should have this kind of functionality, particularly for people who work by ear, to be able to transpose and move around their information as easily as possible. So last time we put down the MIDI kind of system in terms of the numbers that are typically going to be in the system, just as our background information that we'll pull in later. And then we talked about the numbering system that's going to be most efficient for us as human beings. And then we broke out the Nashville numbers, which is going to give us our relative positions, which will be dependent on the 12 collections of notes, and then the tonics being dependent upon, or the modal points that we're playing in, whatever each of those is the tonic. Then we built the normal chords, giving multiple names for those same chords, so that we can then represent each of the chords without showing the note name, which makes it easier for us to transpose them in our system, naming everything by relative position, as is done with the Nashville number system. Now we're going to be adding then our actual modal point names for each of the chords that are typical for, or each of the chords that do not have notes outside of a typical 7-note collection. So in other words, we have 12 collections of 7 notes. We can build chords off of each of those 7 nodal points or modal points, and these are going to be the names of each of the chords that can be constructed without choosing notes that are basically in the ocean. It would be nice then in our musical system to be able to write down chord names instead of having to write down each individual note as we stack chords on each other. So that's going to be the idea. We'll get into this bit later, and then we will also make then the relative positions, giving the list of the 12 notes by relative positions, and then list out the number of the notes for each of the 12 positions, and then break that out by letter as well. And then this is the actual data input, which would be kind of like what I would think of as modern sheet music, in which case you're going to be able to use chords, which you can write any of the ways that we represented this way or in the conventional format. And if it was a DAW system, it can convert it. It should be able to convert it to any format that you want to view the chords in. But the point is that we would like to represent things as the Nashville number system does, without referring to the note points, but rather relative position. That then allowing us to easily transpose the information without having to write a whole new sheet music we could just use the same thing and say, now we're playing in this collection of notes. Now we're playing in the collection of notes around the C, now the D, now the E, and so on and so forth. We can also then rotate it, changing the tonic. Then we can convert this to our DAW system over here, which is going to break out everything in a longer format, which you might be more used to. Notice over here, as we do it like a sheet music format, it would be nice to have one column or one row designated to, in essence, one octave, so that everything's a little bit tighter. And if we use numbers, then that would actually be easier to see. And I think that was actually easier for people that don't know music theory as well, too. But we can do the same thing this way, converting back and forth between the numbers and the letters to whatever convention that we want. That's the idea. So let's go on to the blank tab, continuing on. So we had our underlying foundation. These here are going to be our chords. So we built out our chords. Now what I'm going to do is name the chords by modal point. Now note that you can't do this if you name the chords by, like, I'm in the collection of notes of the key of C. So if I'm in the collection of notes of the key of C, then I build a chord off a C major, off of the C node. I'm going to end up with a C major 7, C major 9, C major 11, C major 13 chords that would be the types of chords that are in our standard chord convention built off of the notes that are in the 7-note collection. But I could represent those chords by eliminating the C and just represent them by relative modal position, meaning it's a 3-note Ionian chord, or notes 3 Ionian chord, or it's an Ionian chord with 2 modal whole steps up from it, meaning the last note in the range we want to get to is 4 modal half steps, 2 times 2, 4 modal half steps. And then I could represent it as the tonic with a capital I, and that would tell me that I'm playing in the Ionian mode. So for example, down here, what if I'm playing in the Lydian mode? You could tell people, look, I'm playing in F Lydian, right? But it would be nice to tell them, look, we're playing in the collection of notes around C major, and then I'm going to make the Lydian the tonic, right? I'm going to make the Lydian the tonic, which is the 4 Nashville number system 4. That's going to be the center point. And if you write our sheet music like that, then we can define what collection of notes we're playing in. There's only 12 of them then, right? And then we can define which chord we're going to be playing in, and we could do that by possibly just capitalizing the chords so that you can see, the chord that we're in. All right, that's the general idea. All right, so let's make a skinny. I'm going to grab this skinny over here. I'm going to format paint it, home tab, format paint, make that on the X. And so then what I'm going to do, I'm going to move over my cheat sheet a bit up top. So then I'm going to say, if we're on the Ionian node, so this is going to be the Ionian node. I'm just going to type it in there. We're going to say this is going to be the 1. So how do I build a chord from a nodal standpoint? Well, the Ionian from a Nashville number system is the 1, and then I skip every other note. That's how you build a chord. So what we're gonna have for this one is gonna be the 1, and then it's gonna be this 1 plus 2, and then it's gonna be equal to that 3 plus 2. So we have the 1, 3, 5. Now that might sound familiar, of course, because that's the normal terminology we use when we think of scale degrees. How do you make a chord? You pick up the 1, 3, 5. But realize what I'm talking here isn't necessarily scale degrees. I'm talking about the modal points, meaning the 1 represents Ionian, the 3 Phrygian, the 5 Mixolydian. In other words, if I did this down here on the Lydian is the 4. So I'm starting on the 4, and then it's going to be 4 plus 2 is 6, and then it's going to be 6 plus 2 is going to be 8, and then I have to take 8 minus 7 because it should be there's only 7 modal points because we're going to think about the local distance. So that one then would be a 4, 6, 1, meaning we're going to have a Lydian, an Aeolian, and an Ionian. Okay, So that's the general idea that we want to pull in here. How can I do the formatting of my formulas to make that as easy as possible? So up top, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, look, if this goes over 7, then I want you to just take this whole thing minus 7. So all I have to do is take this first number and then add 2 because that represents 2 modal half steps, which is how we build a chord. We go every modal whole step from the note before it in the 7-note collection, not the 12-note collection. We're working in the 7-note collection, and we're building chords that are only going to have notes from that 7-note collection, which are in essence the conventional chords within a collection. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to say if tab, then copy this and say if that plus that is less than 8, meaning it can be 1 through 7, then do that plus that. If not, comma, then do that plus that minus 7. 7, right? And then close it up, boom. That's our formula. So I can then copy that this way, and I still get the 1, 3, 5. And if I copy this down here, I copy this here, I still get the 6, and then this should go not to 8, but to 1, which it does. So that looks like it works. So now if I go down, each of these, if I have a 4-note chord for the Ionian, it's still going to start on the 1 representing the Ionian node. So we have 1, 1, 1, 1. And then I could do the formula either way here. I'm going to copy it down this way, though, because I want consistent formulas. If I copy this down, now it's going to do that same formula this way. This one, however, is a 4-note chord. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to pull it to the right. So if it's a 4-note chord, it's going to be 1, 3, 5, 7, meaning Ionian, Phrygian, Mixolydian, Locrian. Those are the nodes that we would actually hold down. This one I'm going to pull out 2 more. So the next one out would be 7's the top of it. So then we go back to the 2, and the 2 represents the Dorian. So then we pull this one out, and this is going to be to the 4, and the 4 represents the Lydian, and then this one's going to be pulled out to here, one more out, boom, and this one goes out to the 6, which is the Aeolian, and this one goes out to then the 4, which is the Lydian. No, wait a second. Well, wait, not this one. That's too far. I'm just working on this one. I was like, wait a second. Now let's select all of these, double click, and tighten it up. All right, so there we have it. So those are going to be the modal points. Let's make this blue and bordered. So I'll make this bordered and blue. Okay, so we have the same thing down here. If I start on the 4, it's going to be the same all the way down. So it's going to be 4. That's going to be the Lydian node. And then if it's a 3-note triad, if it's a 3-note Lydian chord, it's going to have the 4, 6, and the 1, which represents the 4 is Lydian, the 6 is Aeolian, and the 1 is Ionian. So then I'm going to copy this one out to here. Whoops, wait a sec. Let's copy this down. And then I copy this one out. So the next one out would be a 3, and the 3 would be the Phrygian. Let's copy this all the way down. And then if I go one more out here, this would be a 5-note chord. You just take every other note in the 7-note collection, not the 12-note collection, and you end up with the 5, the relative Nashville number 5, which represents the Mixolydian. We pull this one out, and then we're going to do the same thing, but now we're going to add a 7, which is the Locrian, and then we're going to pull this one out, and we're going to add everything, but then also the 2, which is the Phrygian. Let's make that green. So I'm going to say that's going to be bordered and then green, and we'll continue the pattern down. So this is going to be, I will copy, well, this is going to be, 5. I'm on Mixolydian, which is 5. Mixolydian is 5. So I'll copy that down. Boom. And then I'll copy this formula. Copy. I'm going to paste it just the formulas only, so it doesn't take that green formatting. And then boom, copy that over this way. Bam, copy that down this way. That's the 3-note triad. So for a Lydian, you've got a Mixolydian. You've got a Mixolydian node, a 7 is a Locrian, and a 2 is the Dorian. Those are the nodes. And then if I go down here, if I add one more for a 4-note Mixolydian chord, then you're adding the 4, which is a Lydian. If I go down here and I add 2 more, I'm adding the 6, which is the Aeolian. Adding another one, we're adding the 1, which is the Ionian. And then going out and we're adding the 3, which is the Phrygian. And then I went down here, I went too far, but let's make that one. Now we're on the Aeolian, which is 6. So I'll make this one blue. Let's make these blue, bordered and blue. So now if I start on the Aeolian node, then which is Nashville number 6, it's going to be 6 and then 7, 1. 1 is the Ionian, and then 3, which is going to be the Phrygian. Copy that down. Copy that down to here. And so, oh, wait a sec. I have to equal, this is always going to be 6. This is 6 all the way down. So you get the 6, 1, 3, and then if I go a 4-note Aeolian chord, you add the 5. And the 5 is, of course, the Mixolydian. If I go 2 out, then I'm going to add the 7, which is Locrian. If I go another note out, I'm adding the 2, which is Dorian, and then another one out. We're going to also have the 4, which is the Lydian. Notice that all 7 notes in the collection are included here. In practice, on a guitar, you're typically not going to play all, you can't physically even do all 7 notes, right? You're going to drop some of the ones in the middle. And we could come up to more stringent ways to build a chord to show that. But if you're working in a DAW system or something like that, I would think it'd be nice to have just the standard chords at least at your fingertips to build a basic chord off. And if you want more complex chord, then you can use this as your baseline and then build on top of that instead of using this chord. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Instead of having like every possible chord available, have the standard chords so that you can group them together and then build on top of that as you using that as like the baseline, you know, or as the foundation. In any case, let's go to the next one. We're going to say this is the Dorian, so that's going to be a 2. So 2, this will equal the 2 above it. We're going to copy that down to here. We'll copy this and paste it with the formula only. Bring that over 1. So that means the Dorian is a 2, Nashville number 2, and then the 4, which is the Lydian, right? The 4 is the Lydian, and then the 6 is the Aeolian. Let's copy that down. So we'll take this whole thing, copy that down, and then we'll copy this one out this way. So now you've got the 1, adding another 1, which is the Ionian. Copy it out 2 times. You got the 3, which is the Phrygian. Copy it out another one. You got the 5, Mixolydian. Copy it out again. You've got the 7, which is the Locrian. Let's make this bordered and blue. Okay, and then the next one we have is the Phrygian. So it's going to be 3. This equals the 3 above it. Copy that down. And then I'm copy these 2 this time. These 2 might be easier to see. Copy those 2. Paste it, formulas only. So Phrygian starts at 3. Nashville number 3 plus 2 is 5. That's going to be the Mixolydian plus 2 is 7, which is the Locrian. So 3, 5, 7 is how you make the triad. Copy that down and then add another one. A 4-note Phrygian is going to add the 2, which is Dorian. And then if I add another one, it's going to add the 4, which is Lydian. If I add another one, it's going to add then the 6, which is Aeolian. And another one we add then, which is the 1, which is the Ionian. Let's make that bordered and green. And then we'll copy it again. We'll copy this and let's do this triad up here. Copy that and paste it formulas. And then I'll copy that down. So if we're on the Locrian, then notice this way, the Locrian's a tough mode, but if you look at it this way, it's just the same idea because we're just taking the collection of 7 notes, we take every other one. So we just have the 3. So if we start on the Locrian, by the way, it's not a 3. This is going to be a 7. 7. Did I do that right? Yeah, 7. Because I did the majors and then the minors and then the Locrian. So it'd be a 7-2-4, which is Locrian, Dorian, Lydian. And then if I take this one and I add one more to it, we'd be adding the 6, which is Aeolian, adding one more to that, the 1, which is Ionian, adding one more to that is the 3, Phrygian, one more to that would be the 5, which would be the Mixolydian. Let's make this bordered and blue. Okay, so that's our general idea there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I want to list out all of the collection of notes by relative perspective. So I'm going to put my cursor here, format, paint this, and put it on the AF. Now I'd like to go from the bottom up. So it might be easier to think of it the other way though, and then maybe we can flip it. So in other words, from a relative perspective of a 7-note collection, then what we have is the formula of whole, half, whole, half, right? So I would, if I'm starting on the relative Nashville number 1, so if I go from the 1 to the 2, that's usually going to be a whole step. That means that there's going to be a note in between. I'm going to represent the note in between with a 1.5. So I'm going to add decimals here. Let's add decimals all the way down here maybe. Add decimal. Just 1 decimal is all we need. And then that's going to give me to the Nashville number 2. And then there's a whole step between the 2 and the next one. So there's got to be a 2.5 before we get to the one that's in the 7-note collection, which is 3. And then here, that's the half step. So from 3 to 4, there is no half step, right? If you think about the piano in the key of C, 3 to 4, there's not going to be a 0.5 because we have 7 notes out of the 12-note collection. And then we're back to a whole step, so there's got to be a 4.5, and then there's going to be a 5, which is in the 7-note collection, and then the 5.5, which is outside, what I call in the ocean. It's not in the 7-note collection. And then 6, and then we're going to have a 6.5 because we're right here. We're going into the 0.5 before we get to the last whole step, and then the 7, which is going to be in the 7-note collection. Now, when we're here, it's going to be another half step to get, in essence, back to the 1. All right. So what I want to do is invert that because, like with the sheet music, I'd like to see it rising because on a guitar, it's kind of nice for us to see it to see everything kind of the guitar's shape, the fretboard to go down. So this might actually be a nice way to see it when you're mapping things out on the guitar. And that might be another way that you might want to represent your DAW, that you can actually flip it around and see it the way you would see your instrument. I think that would be a really cool feature to have like in a DAW, and that might be a way that you want to write your music because your instrument happens to go higher in pitch as you go down towards the floor, and I'd rather represent my Excel spreadsheet to mirror like my fretboard in essence. That would be the easiest way to visualize it. But traditionally, we have it rising in pitch, right? And that's what's going to tie out to like a MIDI type of system. So I kind of want to reverse this. One way I could do that is I can copy this and maybe paste it special. And then I can say, okay, let's transpose. Transpose. Boom. Oh, now I transposed that way. And that didn't do exactly what I wanted it to do. Huh. Let's undo that. I think there's a way to do it, but let's just do it this way. I'm just gonna rename the numbers going from bottom to top. 7, 6.5, and let's go ahead and add the decimals this way. 7, 6.5. I'm just copying from here. 6, and then 5.5, 5, 4.5, 3, 2.5, 2, 1.5, and then 1. This should be 1.5, not 1.2. And I think that's it. All right, so now it's rising up that way. And so as we go through it, it's going higher in pitch. Or if I went from, it would be going towards the right hand on the piano, is like going up in pitch. Okay, so if that's the case, so then we're going to double click here. Now the key that we're used to seeing, let's use that as our check figure key, which is the key of C. The key of C has a 4 in our naming convention. See, 4 is C normally in our naming convention. So now I just want to write down the collections of notes from there. And normally you'd say, well, I'm just going to go up in pitch, so it's just going to be 4 plus 1, which would give me, 5, and then plus 1 is going to give me 6. But I'm going to end up with a problem because from a local distance, there's only 12 notes. So what this needs to do is go from 4 up to 12, and then this needs to be a 1, another A, because I'm not going down, I'm not representing octaves with absolute numbers. So I need to have a way, well, if I start on a 4, I need to have a way that it's going to go back down as I go up here. So what I'll do is let's do a formula and say this is going to be equal to this plus 1. That's right, but I'm going to double click on it and say if logic test this plus this copy is less than 13, meaning it can go from 0 to 12, but 13 no. Because there's no 0.5s here, so we should be good there. And then comma, then do that. But if not, comma, do that minus 12, meaning when you get to 13, subtract 12, which will bring it back to 1, which is an A for our purposes. So we'll say, okay, boom. Copy that up, bam. And so this is going to be our musical alphabet from the key of C with our all 12 notes represented. And notice that the ones that are here with a 0.5 are the ones that are outside of our collection of notes. So I can say that like the ones that are inside the collection of notes then are going to be here, right? Let's do it this way. I'll say this is within the collection of notes. And then this is a whole step in the collection of notes. Here's a whole step in the collection of notes. Half step in the collection of notes. Whole step in the collection of notes. Whole step in the collection of notes, and then whole step in the collection of notes, half step back to the 1. So those are going to be in the collection of notes. Now notice that works for all of the modes as long as I just say, well, now I'm going to have the 3 be my modal center point. Then if it's still the collection of notes around the key of C, but I'm going to say the 3 is now my center point, which means I'm going to be playing in the Phrygian node, then I still have the same collection of notes. The only problem, however, is usually when I play an octave from this place, when I play the scale from here, I don't go back and have the lower notes back here. I would keep on rising up. That's going to be an issue when we try to map this out. But when you're thinking about a circle, it's the same notes from an absolute or local distance perspective. Okay, so that makes sense. So I think this makes sense. So let's go ahead and say this is going to be going out this way, 4 plus 1. I'm going to copy this out until I get to 12 collections of notes. 12 collections of notes is here. Let's go ahead and double click, making this a little smaller. That's too small. All right, and so there we have it. And then I can copy this across this way, and that should be good. And then all of these collection of notes are going to be starting from, like this is starting from a D, right? And then and then I get the same 12 collections of notes, but just rotating around the different starting points. So meaning if I apply that same formula to the 4 note, which is a C, and then to the 5 note, which is a C sharp, and then to the 6 note, which is a D, I have the same collection of notes. You can see the pattern here emerging in this collection of notes. I'm just rotating through them as though we only have 12 notes that just go around in a circle removing the idea of the octave. Now let's bring it back, because really I could go back here to add the collections of notes around the A sharp, and B notes. So I'm going to insert, I'm going to put my cursor here and insert 1, 2, 3 columns, right click and insert. And then I want to copy this backwards. This is this -1, and then we'll bring this back. And then I'll bring this back. And this needs to, let's remove the decimals here. We don't need decimals on these ones. And then I'll copy this one up, just formulas, so I don't remove the green. Boom. And then let's get rid of the decimals. There we go. And then I can pull the green all the way across like that, just to show. And now we'll add the letters now here in a second, just so we can see it that way as well, now that we have the numbers. But give me a second. So there's our table. And then this will be like the relative positions. Right, let's make it black and white. Black and white. Okay. And then let's put borders around this. Maybe I should have done this, put this on top and this on. Nah, I'm okay with that. I've already worked it out. Okay, so then now underneath I'm going to add the same table, but now I'm going to add the letters. So let's copy this whole thing, and then I'll paste it down here, but then I'll delete the inner bit, and we'll just do an X lookup to convert these numbers to letters. How? We just say equals X lookup. X lookup that 12, comma. I want you to find that, Excel, in the collection of notes, where we have this collection of notes right there, 1 through 12, but then return, comma, this. You can see the formula up top here. I want you to return this. So it's going to find that A in this series and return the related, that 1, and return the related A. Enter. Boom. So then I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it. Well, let's just copy it across this way. Wait. That's not right. Double click. I need to make these references absolute. F4 on the keyboard. F4 on the keyboard, F4 on the keyboard, $sign before the letter and the number, so that the ranges do not move when I change the formula or copy and paste the formula. Now let's copy this over, and then I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it here, formulas only, so I don't overwrite the green. Right click, paste it with just the formulae, and so there's our table. So now we're typically working oftentimes in C, right? So let's just double click the notes in the key of C. The one is C. If I go 2, I get the D. And then this one's in the ocean, right? This one's in the ocean, C sharp or D flat. And then the 3 is E. And then there's no ocean note between E and F. And then you've got F has F sharp, G flat in the ocean. Then you've got G, which is the 5, Nashville number 5. And then you've got G sharp or A flat, which is in the ocean, 5.5. And then you've got A, which is Nashville number 6. And then you've got A sharp, then you've got here A sharp or B flat, 6.5, Nashville number system. And then 7, which is going to be the B. So that's going to be, so notice we can still represent all 12 notes in the musical alphabet, but I'm giving them a relative numbering position based on the collection of notes that we are in, as though we're kind of going around in a circle. That then will allow us then to write our music with the Nashville number systems, not forcing us to be limited to just the 7 notes in the collection, but still have the ability to write all 12 notes. And we can do so not with letters, but with the numbers, which I think is actually easier, right? Like if you got used to writing numbers, particularly in a DAW system, rather than having sharps and flats, that's going to be easier. And if you can see that you have a 6.5 is like in the ocean, that's outside the collection of notes, that's going to be easier. So to me, someone that doesn't know music theory it's going to be a lot easier for them to actually just say, hey, look, I'm just going to, all the numbers 1 through 7, that's in the collection of notes. If I want a little tension, I add one that has a 0.5 that's outside the collection of notes, and any of those 1 through 7 that I'm working in, I'm going to make one of them the tonic. So that just means like if the 4 is the tonic, now I'm not playing in an Ionian node, I'm playing off the 4, which is going to be the Lydian mode, right? Lydian mode. So that's going to be the idea, and then we can of course transpose it. If I'm playing in the key of C, that also allows us to easily then transpose everything because I'm writing everything by relative position using Nashville numbers. That allows us to transpose it and rotate it more easily. So that's the idea. So when we write down, so then when we get next time, when I get over here to writing like our music information, then I could still write it traditionally, or that could be the face of the DAW, or one option if you were to put this into like a database program. But I really think that if people, particularly non-music experts, got used to entering it something more like this, then it would be easier. Why? Because then they can just use numbers, and they can actually type in the numbers with a 10 key, and we can see the numbers that are within 1 octave of whatever key that we're working in, which makes the DAW not this expanded, massive thing, right? We can type it in a lot quicker, and I can see what's happening just by the numbers, because there's only 12 numbers and 7 are in key within an octave. And then I can even add chords that are in that perspective as well. Like if I was writing by hand, this is the way I would now write it. I think this is more efficient than sheet music, clearly, if you're writing something for like a guitar where you're going to use chords instead of just the note names. And if you use the relative position, then you can write it one time and even by hand on a piece of paper and be able to play it in all 12 collections of notes without having to rewrite the information because you wrote it in relative position. And then when you go up an octave, that's when you go up the octave up here. So that's going to me, that would tighten things up a lot rather than putting 4 different octaves, 12 notes each stacked on each other like this, which is the typical DAW system, right? This is going to be a little bit, that'll be a little bit easier on the eye, but I do think in a DAW system, you should be able to do either one, right? Which we'll do. We'll build this out later and we'll say, I'd like to write it this way and then build it out this way, but you should be able to do either one, meaning I could build it this way and then possibly tighten it up this way, right? I believe all those options should be doable in a database properly designed. That's but I'm going to write it from one perspective and then, okay, so that's the idea. So we'll move on to that next time.